everyone, and welcome back to Depth of Field. We are sitting here with the great Terrell Lloyd. Terrell, welcome to B&H Depth of Field.
Well, thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it to be on your show.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to it. And I actually do the programming for Depth of Field, and I'm very excited to host a sports photographer. Because Depth of Field is all about experiencing new ways of photography to hopefully make money and be a professional photographer. And you have really had an amazing career. You're going on 25 years with the San Francisco 49ers as the staff photographer, which some would say is actually a dream job. Doing sports photography is super fun, super cool, really exciting. And you're also out in San Francisco. You got a great team. As a matter of fact, here I am, and I'm in one of your pictures right on the field with you.
Well, let me tell you, that picture is interesting because it was like we were playing in Washington and it was pouring down raining. So that makes for some of the great looks and great images too. It's hard to shoot in the rain though, but you can get some epic shots.
Well, we're gonna talk about your career. We're gonna talk about some shooting suggestions and talk about Little League and Pee Wee League and the Big League and how you get these amazing photographs on the sidelines. So let's just talk about where you started, just to let everyone know out there. Terrell and I had a long conversation a couple of weeks ago, and we discussed all sorts of things about Terrell's career and sports photography and difficulties, and it was pretty amazing. And one of the things that stood out to me was you talked about going to your son's Little League and covering the Little League games, and also what you got me when you said you brought out a table where you dropped the pictures for the team. So tell us a little bit about your start, Terrell.
Well, it's funny. I mean, my career, and when we talked a little bit earlier, we should have taken that one too, because that was actually pretty good. But my career, my first career, and I'm about to date myself, but I was a professional bowler. If you ever seen bowling on TV back in the day, I went out on the Pro Bowlers Tour when I was 21 years old, and I was one of the top youth bowlers growing up in San Francisco. But I was always an avid 49er fan. Growing up in San Francisco, I felt that I've come full circle because when I used to have a paper route, I used to cut out images from the newspaper and make my own 49er books. And look at what I do now. So I've come 360 on that. But my mother always had a camera. And I always liked pictures and certain things like that. Then, when I came off the tour after so many years and I got a corporate job, I started a photography business. The company where I worked at wanted asked me, did I do any corporate events? And, I didn't do that, but I like, okay, well, let me, pick up my camera and do some things. And I started doing some wedding photography and some portrait photography. And I joined my local photography association, right? And that's when the love for photography came back. And so then when my son was younger, right, and he started playing Little League, it was like, well, let me go out and take some pictures of him. So then all of a sudden I became like the photographer for our community where we lived at. And I started photographing all of the Little League teams from T-ball on up to like Pony League, right? And so while my son was playing different games and when he wasn't playing games, I would photograph the other teams. And I had a crew of photographers that would come out that would help me shoot it. And so then we started selling photos. I would have packages for if they wanted to buy all the 5x7s or, so many 5x7s. So it worked out pretty well as I honed my skills until he, went to high school. And then, I kind of like walked away from the youth sports side of it after that. That's how I got my start, really. I want to say, not my start in shooting, but yet, just in the youth football side of it. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Now, tell us how you evolved into becoming the dream job of the 49ers official staff photographer.
Well, it's interesting. And during all that transition, everything kind of overlapped. And one of the former players for the 49ers had a little, after he stopped playing, had a little diner in the area where we lived at. And me and my son used to go in there and, get some hamburgers, fries. And he said, oh, you ought to go out and shoot on the field. Now, I had been a season ticket holder since 1981. And so when you can do this, I was taking my camera to the games and shooting from the stand. So I would literally be 10 rows away from the field, right? And I remember one of my, I don't want to say iconic shots, but I say memory shots was of Joe Montana. And I knew it was going to be his last game, right? And, I'm shooting, I think with a 70 to 200 with an extender on it, and, got a couple of shots from the field. And I said, man, it'd be great to get on the field. And then one of the former players ended up talking to the PR director at the time. And this was in like 93, 94, right? And so in 94, I got a pass to go on the field. And then that's when, things like kind of like a light bulb clicked. And I said, man, it'd be great. And that was like a pipe dream. And said, it'd be great to get with the 49ers. And a funny story on this one, because after I thanked him for, allowing me to shoot on the field, because I wasn't shooting for a magazine or anything like that, he said, well, give me a call next time and we'll see what we can do. And so David, literally, I called him every week and he said it every week, right? And so at the last game, they make the playoffs, they're getting ready to make a Super Bowl run. And I called him like I knew him, and he hung up the phone on me. And I was devastated, right? I'm like, oh, well, I guess I was a little bit too aggressive. But then I got, I said, well, how do I get on the field? So then I got on with a small magazine. And then in a short time, from 94 to 96, I got with the team in 96 indirectly. And that's when I started paving my way in 96. And as you see over my shoulder here, 25 seasons later, now I'm the director of photography for the San Francisco 49ers.
How many photographers do you manage underneath you?
Well, I have a young lady that works for me full time. And then I have about 8 other contract photographers that work with me during the game, during the season, doing events off season. Matter of fact, we have a big event in Carmel, California on Thursday. And that's going to be 4 of us down there shooting. So quite a few people. Yeah.
Let me ask you, again, because we want to help out people who want to get into this field. When you have those photographers that are on contract for you, what is it how would you get that job? I mean, how would they, what do you recommend to become a contract photographer? You're the boss. How do you judge the hiring of these folks?
Well, it's interesting because I would get emails, or I'll get DM messages on, Instagram, and, photographers like, hey, if you ever need any assistance or need any help, and, you kind of like, but you get that a lot, right? You get, everybody wants to help you carry your gear or get on the field and so on and so forth. And I tell them, we have a full squad right now, but then sometimes I'll have openings for, like, say, for photographers to shoot in the stands or shoot fan photos or shooting around the stadium, getting marketing photos or whatever events that are going on, I would bring in photographers and train them, at that standpoint as well. So like sometimes I'll need additional photographers for our suite photos, right? And what we'll do is, like, our marketing group will have a request to say, hey, we got 20 suites where we need to get group photos there, what we call grip and grin, things like that, right? And sometimes and shooting those, and it gives them a way of getting in personally, right? Or help shooting events. And then they can grow their skills from there, right? Not necessarily they're going to be on the field because I already have my photographers there, but then later on, opportunities could probably open up. Give you another example is I usually used to have 2 grips with me, and we'll talk about gear stuff later on in the conversation as well. But, I work with a lot of cameras, right? And, 600 millimeter, 400 millimeter. So sometimes I'll have assistants carry my gear on the field. That's an opportunity there as well. So one of my contract photographers, they have been with me for about, I want to say 14, 15 years now. And they started off just carrying gear for me. They would be on my right side and my left side. And for 2 or 3 years, they would see how I'm shooting. I would talk about, what my thought process is, when I'm making changes, lighting directions on the field. And now they go off and they're shooting on their own now for me around the stadium.
Thank you for sharing that point, because that's getting in there. And what I heard you say was essentially that they get in, we're doing the grunt work, doing the group photos in a suite.
Right.
Those are
fan photos.
That's money pictures for the club and for the sponsors and whatnot. But someone's got to do it, and it's a great way they show their dedication and hard work. Because,
but also to add a little bit to that, for on the tip side, is like I would tell the young photographers, learn how to edit photos, learn how to select photos. It's like sometimes other photographers are looking for editors during the game as well, right? And if you have skills like that, that could be a good skill to have, where they may say, hey, do you know how to edit? The young lady that works for me is, our photo manager, and she manages all our assets. So she's our editor, my editor. Now, before I used to do all the edits early on when, I didn't have a big team, and then we'll be, at our old stadium, I would come home and have to edit 4,000 or 5,000 images myself from me and a few other photographers that shot for me. Right. Mm-hmm. And then as time evolve and time grows, then you pass that on to when you hire a person to edit. Right now, they're not going to edit like you, but they know your style. They kind of know what, but she honed her skills on editing. So it's like, that's a key thing too.
So do you ever, you're shooting stills, do you ever turn on video mode?
No, more or less I'm a still photographer. We have in-house video crew that's doing most of the videos.
Okay.
And then we also have our social team that's doing their, social work as well, with social media work, with their iPhones, capturing highlights, end zone, touchdown celebrations real quick. But we provide all the still photography for the organization.
I think I just collectively heard a sigh of relief from all the still photographers out there. But now I've just heard that as saying, to be a great sports still photographer, you don't have to learn video.
I dabbled in the video early on when these cameras came out, with video mode and stuff like that. But it's, I'm a still guy, Okay.
All right, let's talk a little bit technical. We're going to share some images in a little bit. You can talk about those images, but technical, tell us about your camera settings and in particular, focus settings, because focus has gotten so much more advanced. Remember the old first autofocus, you'd put it into the C mode. It would kind of follow, but now it's very complicated. And also, Terrell, you are a Canon Explorer of Light, which means you have access to some of the best equipment underneath the sun.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's funny because my first digital camera I bought back in 96. Yeah, 1996 was a 2 megapixel camera. Right. And it was like, it cost me $12,000. And that's what really got me in the door with the 49ers, because film was king during that time. Right. And so it was like, I knew where technology was going to go. And since that camera, I've had every flagship digital camera that Canon has produced. Right. And so, but I learned on digital early on, focusing has gotten 1,000 times better compared to back then. Right. So focusing is it has always been the key. Right. And the cameras, like I say, has gotten much better. So now if you look at we're into the age of mirrorless now. Right. And so when you look at mirrorless cameras, it's different than, say, the DSLR cameras. Right. You got so many focusing options, so many things you can do. You got tracking, you got face tracking, auto detection, you could track birds. I mean, it's so many different ways that you just have to dial the camera into your style. Right. And so, but one thing for me in sports, if you look at it, say on a football, you're shooting football and there's so many guys, you got, 22 players on the field, 11, right? And it's hard to do people tracking because you got so many bodies going in different directions, right? So my focusing points that I use for football, I'm still dead on the dead center focusing points. And I'm following the action where everything is basically going, right? Now, you can also say when I shoot.
I'm sorry, Terrell, hold on 1 second. When the ball snaps, how do you follow the ball? Because those guys are professionals. They hide the ball and do fake outs and stuff.
Exactly. So it's and that's one of the questions I knew you had in shooting sports is it's what are you going to do? Right. And I tell people, they always ask me, say, you have to understand the game. If it's football, baseball, basketball, hockey, soccer, you got to understand the game. So, by me and say other sports photographers, they understand football. Right. So they come in with a game plan and agenda of what they're going to shoot. Now, for myself, right, it's I'm trying to look to see, okay, is there 2 tight end set, or is it 4 wide receivers? Is there 1 running back in the backfield? Okay, so I'm basically capturing. I got a game plan where it's funny because it's a whole session on shooting sports. But say, for example, I'm looking to see if the quarterback goes back to pass or if he hands off. If he hands off, right, then I'm waiting for the running back to come around the end or up the middle, so on and so forth, right? But if he goes back to pass, you got receivers on both ends. So it's where do you go? So you follow the quarterback, and then depending on where he's going to throw, you follow the ball as the ball's going to the receiver. But certain things could happen so quickly, right? So sometimes it's a guess. You're lucky. You're lucky if you capture it, but yet it's a matter of what you want to capture. But it's like understanding the game and understanding the flow of the game and watching it through the lens and where you're going to pan and go to. I think what we ought to do later on as in the future is really, dive into like really each play by play and how I capture an image. And when we talk about some of the other image, I can tell you like my thought process on that.
That's pretty heavy duty because that's an investment in the sport as well as the craft of photography.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a big consideration.
Yeah.
And now you've been doing it 25 years, but you just described was quite advanced. Obviously, 25 years, you're a master photographer. And when you're first getting into it, I assume first couple of years you start to really learn.
Oh,
You Terrell, you can watch football on a TV or in a stadium, but when you're down tracking it with a 600 millimeter lens,
right.
That's a totally different story. I mean,
exactly. And now early on, I had to learn how to shoot football. I mean, if I showed you some images, from back in 94, 95, 96, you'd be like, oh man, okay, yeah, we need to do some work, right? And so, there's times where I've missed plays because when I first started, I was watching the play and wasn't taking a photo, right? So I learned how to watch the game and the flow of the game through the viewfinder.
now, are you shooting RAW and JPEG or just JPEGs? Are you shooting just RAWs? Which files are you saving?
Well, that's going to be interesting because I know some photographers, they shoot RAW, right? I am a JPEG shooter. I shoot everything in JPEG. And let me tell you why. Early on cameras, remember I told you I had every camera. Early on cameras, I would shoot RAW, right? And then convert them to JPEGs, right? But as the cameras got better and better in the way it processes the file, and the chips got better, the processor got better, they started processing the large JPEGs pretty good. I'm a strong believer, and I tell this in my seminars, is like, get it in camera right the first time, and you shouldn't have a problem. If you expose everything correctly, you won't have a problem. So we have blown up some images around the stadium here that's very large, and they were JPEG files. But as my outtake started increasing, if the way I shoot now, if we get into the numbers of what I shoot now during a game, which is about almost 8,000 to 9,000 images a game, it's like, imagine all those raw files, then I would have to convert. It would take me a week to convert them all.
I'm with you. I love if you get it right, a JPEG is really a wonderful thing. If you get it wrong, a RAW gives you more information to play with. But when you're talking the volume of shots that you have,
correct.
I mean, it's got to be JPEG, and you don't want to be waiting while it's buffering. That could be that could be terrible. That could be the best play of the night happens, and your camera was buffering.
But I used to say in my seminars, I said, and I hate to use that term, but it was if it was garbage in, it's garbage out, right? It's like, why would you have to go back and like say, oh, I'll fix it in post. When you can get it right the first time, and then you don't have to fix it. But when you look at like all the mirrorless cameras that are out now, and especially with the R3 that Canon's come out with, the R5, I shot with the R6. I mean, these files are just beautiful in JPEG. And as long as you don't blow out the highlights, it's like, my wisdom was always, I would tell some of my assistant photographers, right? I'd say, I would rather for you to be a little bit under than a little bit overexposed. Because if you're a little under, you can bring that back up. But if you're too far overexposed and try to bring it back, and if you blow out the highlights, you're done.
Lose the detail on the highlights.
Exactly.
Well, good point about the cameras getting better and better. Because I'll tell you, a lot of the discipline that you garnered in the 90s and 2000s, you really don't have to worry about so much anymore because they are just doing that better of a job.
Exactly. And then they're getting faster. So remember I told you the 8,000, 9,000 images. Now I'm up to 10, 11, 12,000 images, and I'm shooting at, either 15 frames per second, or if I bump it up in R3 to 30 frames a second, now my outtake's a lot more now, and then I'm shooting with so many different cameras.
So let's talk about these cameras and this grip that you need to help carry all these cameras. Can you discuss that part of your workflow?
Yeah. So normally, I would shoot, and this was pre-pandemic, right? I would shoot with 5 cameras and almost 9 lenses that I would carry with me, right? And people say, how do you shoot 5 cameras, 9 lenses, and so on and so forth? Well, I would have 2 assistants. One assistant would be carrying the 600 and the 300, and one would be carrying the 400. On my shoulder, I'll have a 70 to 200 on one side and either a 24 or 16 to 35 on my other shoulder. And my think tank modular system that I have, right? I may have 11 to 24. I may have a fisheye in there, 85 1.2. I think I said 11 to 24 already. What else I would have? And either a wide or the 24 to 70, depending on what I want to shoot, right? I may shoot with a 35, 1.8 lens, to get like in low light situations if I'm shooting in the tunnels, right? And so I have to have these lenses.
Sorry, the tunnels.
The intro tunnels. Okay, so when the players are coming out, because there's no lights in them, right? So it's like it's low light. So you want to shoot at the widest aperture as possible to get that detail.
So do you shoot shutter preferred?
No, everything is manual. Everything is
manual.
Yeah. Or it's like it varies depending on what I have. Like normally, I was an aperture priority. I set my aperture, I'll let the camera, dictate the shutter speed, and I'll set my ISO. As I started shooting more mirrorless, it's like I went more to manual mode, per se, aperture priority, right? There are certain situations where, depending on the lighting of that day, sometimes I will shoot in auto ISO. So I'll set my aperture, I'll set my shutter speed, but the camera's set to auto ISO. Give you an example about that one. It's like, say if you're shooting in what you want to say, a split lighting scenario on the field, where part of the field is in the sun, part of the field is in the shade, but you want to maintain a certain level of shutter speed once you come out of the sun and they run into the shade area, right? So now what are you going to do? Because if I was at aperture priority at 2.8 or 3.5, which I'm a 3.5 shooter, and I pan over and I'm at 200 ISO, and say if I'm at 25 hundredths of a second, once I go into the shade, now that shutter speed is going to drop because I'm at a lower ISO. So now if I'm in auto ISO and I'm at 3.5, say at 2000 of a second, now I pan into the shaded area, my ISO is going to go up to get to the proper exposure in that shade area for when they run into that side of the field.
That is a fascinating way to use the new technology in manual with auto ISO.
Yes.
I didn't even realize that actually can be done. But it's amazing because you're setting both parameters.
Correct. Right. But then also, too, if you think about it, and I try to tell photographers as well, it's like positioning on the field is key as well. Right. So say, for example, now, and I want you to think about this, and the viewers to think about this as well. It's like if you're shooting in the shaded area, right, and you're backlit where you're in the shade, but the sun is behind them, right? How are you going to balance for the shade and the sun? So now you got to balance your settings for the shade, and the background is just going to go crazy because it's so bright, right? So my philosophy is I shift over to the sunny side. I play the sun, area, and then I shoot into the shaded area. You see? So now, and then sometimes you can play the edge of that shadow and highlight, and sometimes you can get some beautiful images there as well. But that's my philosophy for shooting backlit.
Interesting. That position is so important.
Yes.
Okay. So I got some questions. I was going to ask you about some football shooting secrets, and you're dropping secrets pretty quickly here.
Exactly. Yeah.
So maybe we'll go to that screen share and just kind of go over your slideshow, and you could just kind of talk about each image and why you selected it and the challenge that it took to make that photo, and of course, what we all love, war stories.
Okay, so let me bring that up real quick. Well, some of the images I'm about to show you here is like I want to show you my team of photographers and some of the assistants that I bring in throughout the year as well. Let's go back to when I first started at Candlestick. It was only me, and it was like, and now I have a team of assistants, people. This image here that you're seeing now is from when we went to the Super Bowl in 2019. I had my assistant photographers, my grips that was on the field. I brought in some other photographers to shoot like up in the stands and shooting down on the field. I had some photographers outside shooting the pyros, out on the field, fan photos. So it takes more than just me and one person really to get it all done. So, I'm a strong believer in teamwork and sharing the glory of football and what we do. So I just wanted to share. I always like to give props out to my team as well. Let's go with one of the background photos that you had on your screen here. This was, like I told you, in Washington D.C. when we played the Washington team, and it was pouring down, raining that day. And when you look at this image, it's hard to shoot in the rain because you can't change lenses. You can't take your card out and do different things. You can't. So you have to, like, if I'm shooting with a 600, I got to keep it on there. If I can't be changing to my 400, so I got to commit to certain lenses, and I still have grips with me there. But when you look at the rain is coming down and they're running, they're muddy. These are just some iconic images that I just love to take at certain times, especially when it's raining. Now, it's like it could be raining sideways, but it's like, when you capture that image, it's just one thing about it as well. Let's go with this one here. This was a couple of years back, and I think it was Nick Bosa's rookie season. And I knew that he was just going to, I guess, got some great tackles and sacks on defense with him. And this one here, I shot down real low with my 300 millimeter lens. It's like sometimes when you shoot from the ground level looking up, it just makes them look so big. Even though I'm kneeling, I'm not standing up on some of the other plays, but yet, that down low, here, Rodgers fumbled the ball. It just makes for just a great dynamic photo shooting from the ground level. So that's why when I work with so many different lenses, I could do different things. If I shot this with the 400, I would be too tight. If I shot this with the 70 to 200, I would have been, too loose. So the 300 millimeter worked very well. That's why I have that out there with me on the field. This one here, I'm the athletic photographer for San Jose State. I don't shoot with as many lenses there because I could shoot inside the benches here. So this one here, image was shot with a 2 to 400. So I also have a 2 to 400 lens where, the focal length will vary. I can shoot at 200 millimeters, or I can shoot at 300, 350, 400. That gives me a little bit, more room without carrying a lot of stuff with me as well. Let's talk about, a little baseball. This one here is actually from behind the net, and wanted to get a nice shot of the batter, but with the pitcher throwing a nice pitch, right? This one is also with the 2 to 400. I don't have to carry a lot of lenses out there. And that 2 to 400, you have a crop filter in there where I can do, a 1.4 crop where it makes it a 5.6 lens. So my focal length would be, a little bit like 560 as well. So that works out. As you see, let's scroll back here. Celebration. We were playing Tampa Bay a few years back, and Richard Sherman intercepts a pass and runs it in for a touchdown. I'm in the end zone, and he puts his hands out, right? This one here, I shot with my 70 to 200 off of my shoulder, right? And so it just makes for a moment, a celebration moment. If you look at the colors, we were talking about white balance, it was an auto white balance. The color details, it does a great job with all the cameras today as well. Let's go to a little volleyball. And this one here, it's actually shot with the 70 to 200 up in the stands looking down. And sometimes I will actually get down on the floor and shoot with the 70 to 200, or I'll shoot with a 24 to 70 down low, just right off the floor or holding it off the floor. So when I tell sports photographers, think about different angles and where they could shoot, where they can move around to, what can they create? That's, I don't want to say we're not, creating the wheel again, but just thinking differently out the box, and so on and so forth. So let's go to a little golf, right? Remember I was talking earlier about positioning, and now that we have the mirrorless cameras that are silenced, now you can really get in. You don't want to get too close to the golfers, but yet you still want to be out of their line of sight so they can't see you. But with the silent shutter, now you could just get some epic shots. Here, I love the light direction of the sun. I look for that a lot, especially if I'm moving around the golf course and I'm photographing our women's team. It's like, and I'm going from different holes. If I see a hole where the lighting direction is real perfect and real nice, where you can see under the caps, under their cap. I love to shoot from those angles, right? I'm always looking at direction of light, where it is, where can I be? How can I produce such a dynamic image with the direction of light that's happening? Sometimes I will shoot in the backlit of a golf course where I still get nice light, but you get nice colors off the trees. So I'm always constantly looking where what would make a nice shot. Same thing here in water polo, right? At our swim pool at San Jose State, the direction of light is great in one direction only, right? If I try to shoot when they change direction, it's hard because now the sun is flaring into my lens. So I was still looking like, what's the best angle? And you have to make adjustments on your camera for the proper exposure as well. Let's go to a little gymnastics, right? This is also in their arena where I still shoot this at 3,700 Kelvin, high ISO. I think I shot this one maybe at 6,400 ISO as well. And, and I framed this up perfectly as she was like getting ready to jump to the other bar. Remember I said earlier, it's like, you got to understand the sport that you're shooting, what they do, what their technique is, what angles will work best for a nice shot. And I just love this because she's suspended in midair, and it just makes for like an epic photo. So let's move across here. Let's go to this one here. Remember, Dave, I was talking to you about, you say, what do you follow? Where's your focusing point? How do you know where the ball is going? Remember, I told you I'll key on the quarterback to see if he goes back to pass. And then what happens is I'll pan over, and this is our tight end here. And, he makes a one-handed catch right there. So it was a long pass. So you got enough time to pan over, ball's coming down, and you'll get it right on the fingertips as well. This is in Philadelphia. It was a, kind of overcast, slightly rainy day, but it was still an auto white balance as well. And so remember, I told you I use that a lot. Let's go in here. Let's go to this one here. This is remember I told you I'll carry like 8 or 9 lenses, right? This one is shot with an 11 to 24, right? So I will get right up into the huddle and shoot at 11 millimeters to produce a wide shot without shooting overhead. So I'm right in there. So this is how I'm producing images for our marketing department, right? So it's a huddle shot that they may use later on down the line. I mean, I'll do this at home. I'll do this on the road. It's like, I'll get in that huddle every time. And then it's just a dynamic. I could not get this really I could get it with a 16 to 35, but it'll be a little bit tighter. Now with the mirrorless, with a 15 to 35, it looks good, but I just love my 11 to 24 when I could get right in the huddle. Let's go to this one here. This is early on when I was contracted to do a lot of photography for agencies and stuff like that. And Serena Williams was playing at the Bank of the West at Stanford. And here I know she always shows a lot of emotion. So I was looking for emotion. That's what you want to do too. You can get them, racket on ball, this and that, volleying back and forth. But sometimes the emotion just carries a lot of weight with an image. So you always want to look for that and be ready for that emotion, because it happens so quickly. You want to be like right on it there. Let's go to, I think we covered a lot there. And then let's look at this is most of my gear, because people like gear, like I said, now this is actually an older one. This was with the 1DX Mark III. And then I think I have the R5 and the R6 in this one, but now I'm totally mirrorless with the R3s. So I made that transition once the R3 started shipping right around November timeframe. And then about the time we were in the playoffs at the end of December and January, and then I shot everything with the new EOS R3s. So I think that sums up a little bit on the image size.
Okay, so Terrell, let's talk about workflow. I know that's a little complicated. You got some wireless solutions happening. You're managing a large number of photographs. Please share with us your workflow techniques.
Well, I've been shooting wireless since Canon has come out with these wireless transmitters. So early on in our stadium back at Candlestick, that infrastructure wasn't there for wireless technology. And so when the ownership decided to build a new stadium, I worked with my IT background, I worked with our IT group to make sure that I'm able to, and me and my team is able to shoot wirelessly from the field. So just to give you a little example of my workflow from starting there, it's like, you got to have a management structure and how you're going to like break out your folders and your images when you're shooting for so many different entities. But if you look at this one here, today we're shooting almost 30,000 images. I got 9 photographers. I got a couple of assistants, right? There's a lot going on. And so we have to break those images out into different folders and different categories based on the game. So this is kind of like our kind of robust folder structure that we've been shooting with for years that helps us out. And anything that we may shoot extra or may have to add in, we just create another folder. So it really gives us a guide to managing a lot of the images on game day. I mean, if you keep it simple on game days, is like, make sure all the cards are formatted, because you don't want to shoot with mixed images from another shoot on the same card, and then you have to edit all that. So, make sure all the cards are formatted. The timestamps in the camera are with the current time. Make sure your wireless connection is working. I mean, wireless has gotten a lot easier in today's world now, even with the cameras today. So it's much easier for us to really transmit images in real time as well. And then, I have to have my photographer assignments already ready to go. And so make sure you have that, because you get your assignments during the week on what the different departments needs, and then you divvy them out from there, right? Also, we're not transmitting everything. So we got selected images that we're transmitting. Post game, all of my photographers now are editing their own selects now. So before we used to have one person do it. Now we have them edit their selects, and then my photo asset manager will, select the final highlights as well. Then post game, we're uploading the entire batch to our network server. Mondays we start the tagging and applying the metadata to all the images, and then everything, a lot of that highlight selected that we tag will go up onto our photo shelter server. So we can pull up by names, player numbers, intros. I mean, we do a lot of metadating on the images itself. Some of the tools that I use, a lot of photographers in the sports side use Photo Mechanic as well. There's this device called Stream Deck. So when I'm uploading images, like say to AP, and I'm at home and doing my own selects, right? I program these keys depending on what I want to tag in those images itself, right? And then there's another application called Typinator. So we'll have the player's roster, and then we can do like, if it's our quarterback is a \10 and then space, and it'll put in his name into like say for right here in Photo Mechanic, right? If I want to put in our cornerback here, I go \20 and it fills in with his name. And then it makes it just without you having to type his name in every time. So all these little shortcuts, things that you could do to speed up time on your editing process, right? So if you look at here, we're transferring from the field. It goes into Photo Shelter here. So now our social team and our Facebook, web, Instagram, Twitter, they will see the images in real time off of Photo Shelter, but we're transmitting like from the field. As you can see, those are my assistants that are with me, as you call them, my grips. You see them there. And then this is how me and my photographers are really getting images transferred through our process. So that's a little bit of my workflow in a nutshell there, just to give you, a little glimpse of that.
Okay, that was some amazing work that you've shot, and the variety of the sports that you're shooting in is really quite admirable. How long do you think it takes you to really get acclimated to a sport in terms of really to start to understand how much time you have to put into a specific sport to understand?
I'd say a couple of years, though. A couple of years. When I finally got, I've been with San Jose State for like 16 years. I started shooting gymnastics, right? And it was like, it was hard, trying to figure out what they're doing, the jumps, the angles. And I would say it took me a couple of years to really, hone the skills on like the gymnastic picture that you saw. I mean, it was like, it takes a while to really, and you got to be, it's like, remember we were talking about focusing points, right? So that focusing point had to be right on the gymnast in order for it to capture that image. If it was off a little bit, and if it was a little soft, I would never show that image. And that's one thing about always show your best work. Always show your best work. It's like if it's so-so, if it's, I wouldn't show it. If you think it's a great image, but it was slights off and not tack sharp, don't show it, right?
Yeah.
Just always stay with your best work. That's the thing too.
Yeah, I think that we can work with some soft and some mistakes in many other fields, but in sports photography,
Mhm.
got to be Johnny on the spot. I have a question for you. I used to work for high schools and colleges in my early career of photography, and I'd cover a few sports. And I tried as best as I could. I had some horror stories, had some good stories. It was the days of film, of course. But here's my question: Is what advice can you give? I used to find that I got the camera, I got the lens, I'm zoomed in on the action, it's happening in front of me, and I just see like these athletes do an amazing play. And instead of clicking down on the shutter and trying to capture the moment, I get a little caught up in the moment through the lens and miss the good shot. I don't know if other people have had this problem happen as well. I don't claim to be a great sports photographer, but is there any advice you have on when to click the shutter in terms of sports?
Well, early on when I mentioned this, I said, early on when I first started shooting, I would do the same exact what you just said, right? It was like, oh, I got caught up in the play and not, capturing the image. So you have to train your mind and say, okay, I got to remember, I'm here to capture image. So I'm gonna once I see it, I'm gonna start shooting, right? Once I feel it, I'm gonna start shooting. So it's like, and then it becomes natural after that, right? So when you if you're early on starting and you say, well, I'm kind of watching, but I need to take photos. You got to always remember in your mind, I got to snap the photo, and then it becomes natural, right? It's the same thing like if you're a wedding photographer, right? Because some things can happen so quickly, even a bride or a bride's mom or dad or a tear coming down the eye, and you look over and it's like you got to boom, snap it and go, right? You got to be ready because you see it for a second, but you got to be ready. But then you got to know you got to look over there, and if you see dad over there and he's getting choked up or something, and you say, oh, something's going to happen, and then you got to start clicking, right? So the same thing in sports. You got to really pay attention to the action, pay attention to what's happening, and then hit that shutter and then go. Yeah.
Okay, Terrell, give us a game plan for photographers looking to get into sports photography.
Game plan for photographers to get into sports. I mean, I think it's harder now, but then again, it's not impossible, right? I think if you're wanting to assist photographers, I would say reach out to photographers. Sometimes you may not get an answer, but then again, just, I've had people reach out to me and I didn't answer them for like 3-4 months, right? And then I got back to them later on, and then I had an opportunity to say, hey, how would you like to come assist with me, right? If I want to say be persistent, but not over persistent, right? And it's like, but then you got to go out and practice, go out and shoot some high school, go out and shoot some little leagues, right? Get some body of work that you could show them, because what happens is if you say you love sports, you love to shoot sports, but you don't have anything, right? Go out, you got to go out and shoot. I mean, like I say, even if it's high school, or it could be junior college if you can't get into the college side of it, right? One thing about colleges now, if you're a photojournalist major or photo major in college, you can go out and shoot some of the sports that they have there as well, and you get experience on that depending on how far you want to go, right? But I think networking is the key, right? It's like, okay, if you go out to like some of the classes or seminars that maybe sports people are putting on, and you meet people, that's one good way too. I just say, I have a phrase: your network is your net worth.
Gotcha. Your network is your net worth. Okay.
Yeah, it sounds the same, but it's like it increases. It's like
no, it makes sense. I love
your wealth, right? It's like you're increasing your wealth, so it's your net worth. Exactly.
Okay. So in terms of your aside from your network and your net worth, you have to invest in some equipment.
Yes.
I know that a 400. We're B&H Photo. I would love to sell everyone a 400 2.8 lens, but that's going to be a little unrealistic, especially the start. So tell us what you recommend for a starting kit.
Well, it's like nowadays, and photography is expensive if you're jumping into it, right? But you got to figure out like what is the most economical way for your budget, per se, right? And sometimes I would tell people like, you could buy used gear. I know B&H sells used gear as well, right? And if your budget is that low, tap into the used gear market, right? Um, Something that would be, it's like since mirrorless is coming of age now, but then the prices, are pretty reasonable. I mean, you can get, an R6 at a decent price, and you can start that realm. You can go and still get EF lenses and buy the adapter for the R6, where if you want to get a 70 to 200, or you can get, a 300 millimeter. I mean, you could shoot some sports with a 300 millimeter, right? As well, and still just move up and down the field.
Okay, so what about using teleconverters? Are they frowned upon, or a good matching teleconverter?
Oh no, teleconverter's gotten much better now too, as well. Like I was gonna say, if you had like say like a 1DX Mark II, right, for example, or a 1DX Mark III, right, and you got one for a nice price, right, you can throw a 1.4 teleconverter on there with a 70 to 200, right, and or you could throw it on there with a 300. So you can start that realm, or you can throw. I've seen photographers out there that would put a 2X converter onto a 70 to 200, right, and that gives you some range there as well. Now, when I first started, I was out there on the field with one camera and a 70 to 200, and I had a teleconverter on. So, that was one, and that was just one camera as I was making my way. And then if I was making money in photography a little bit, depending on what I'm doing on the side, I would save a little bit, and then that's what I can invest into my upgrade per se.
Okay, Terrell, tell us what's next for you. What's on your plate?
Ooh, as far as career wise, or just
I'd say career-wise, sure. What's your dreams and aspirations? You kind of hit. You're an NFL photographer.
right.
That's boom right there. I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
What's next now?
So here's the thing. So we didn't talk about my careers. We talked about how I got started, right? And so I always say this is like my third career. My first career, if you ever followed professional bowling on TV, I went out on the professional bowlers tour when I was 21 years old. So I was one of the top youth bowlers growing up in San Francisco back in the day, and had aspirations of joining the professional bowlers tour. And it's like you got the golf tour, you had the tennis tour, they had the bowling tour, right? And so I was a professional bowler, right? I got rings for perfect games, 800 series, you name it, and so on and so forth. So then, after that tour ended, I bowled professionally for like 12, 13 years, full time for 3 years. And then I went, when I came off the tour full time, I went and got a corporate job, right? And still bowled professionally on a regional level at a high level, but, it was a tough way to make a living. So then, while I was in school, I, was taking computer science and this and that. I got a job working at a telecommunications company, right? And so in their data center, and I worked for that company for almost 20 years, right? Now, you're adding up all these numbers, but everything kind of overlapped, right? So that was my second career. And then when I started my corporate job, I also started my photography business, right? And then that's what led me to the 49ers here. So it's kind of like, you say what's next is like, this is like my dream job when you think about it. And you look at, I go back from when I was a kid, cutting out pictures in the newspaper, making my own books, director of photography. It's like, this is my dream job going forward. And what's next is that the Niners have won 5 Super Bowls. I've been to 5 NFC Championship games and 2 Super Bowls, and we lost both Super Bowls. I'm still chasing that, elusive Super Bowl ring to add to my other collections. But I would love to, possibly like maybe shoot an Olympics one year, something like that. Or, I would love to come out to shoot the US Open that's out in New York. If I had like bucket list to do certain things, but, I'm think where I'm at right now, what I'm doing is just great. If I can inspire the next photographer from this session to say, hey, I could do that too, or I could meet people, or I could network, I could, that's, if I could lead someone in that direction, then that's, I like to do more speaking. I speak a lot now, but it's like, yeah.
It's a gift to be sharing knowledge. And speaking of which, thank you so much. I think you've really dropped some great wisdom for us here at Depth of Field. It was a pleasure to see your work and talk with you and discuss.
Well, thank you.
And Terrell, I want to wish you good luck in your career. Thank you so much. And just to warn you, you may get a few emails after this presentation's out there for some assistant jobs.
That's okay. I mean, that's okay. Sometimes when you talk to people just to give them some advice, it helps them out in the long run too. So like,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. And we'll catch you next time. Thank you very much. Terrell Lloyd.